All right. So this is how we're going to kind of get a project started. Now, there's a big difference with mine and yours, and that is that mine is full of videos from things that I've been editing. Yours will probably be empty, and it'll probably have a slightly different layout than this. I've just made mine smaller. Yours might be in list mode. Um, but basically, this is just a folder of everything that I've got kind of sitting within my project folder. So what we're going to do is look at how we kind of get a new project going. So on yours, what you will have is in this top left corner, it will have the project name and the project location. You need to make sure that you are saving this somewhere that is big enough for the project. Projects tend to get within a couple of gigabytes sometimes, depending on how much you add. A lot more if you're doing a feature length film with loads of graphics and VFX and stuff like that. I mean, as a heads up, the Doctor Strange portal that Marvel use is within the kind of tens of gigabytes on its own, right? So that's the first thing. Is it somewhere that you can actually use? The other thing is I wouldn't suggest doing this directly onto a USB stick, purely because sometimes it struggles with the transfer rate. So what will happen is that you will be editing and it will keep freezing up, or it will take forever for the media to locate. It's much better to locate it somewhere local on the computer, i.e. the actual hard drive. So for me, I'm using the solid state drive that I have because it's quicker. The key thing with it is that wherever you put that project, wherever you put those files, as you are editing, do not move them. And I'll explain why as we go. All right. So usually it will give you options for the sequence and what have you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of start a new project and assume that you accidentally skipped that bit. And I'm going to show you how you can set up the sequence settings within Premiere itself. I'm going to call this Lessons for Premiere, number 1. The sequence here, again, I tend to just keep it the same. If you're going to have lots of sequences within the project, then, keep it quite bland. So I'll just call this Lessons for Premiere, then I can add loads of different sequences with all the different lessons on as I kind of go. All right, that's looking pretty good. I'm going to press create. Okay, and obviously it's just going to bring up all this again. And what you'll see down here now is that I have another project added to my project bin. So if I go back to this tab here, you'll see all the stuff from the editing that I do. This one here, this is the project that I've just started. Now, this can get quite crowded. What you can do is you can right-click these and then you can close them. But I'm not going to do that because then I have to sit there and try and bring it all back in. So this is kind of where you'll start. You won't have any of this. You won't have any of this. You won't have any of this. All right. You are very much going to have a blank slate. And again, if yours doesn't look like it's in this kind of order, go back up to here, change it to editing, and then you'll have this layout. The first thing that I need to do before I start bringing all my videos in is I need to set up a sequence. And the sequence is basically this timeline. This you'll probably see is completely blank. You won't have any videos on there. You won't have anything because it doesn't know what you're trying to make. So how do we do that? This little post-it note tab down here, you see it looks like a folded square. If we click on this, you see it gives us loads of options. And we will be using some of these in some of the videos coming up. But I'm going to go to sequence for now. And it brings up this menu. So this really depends on what it is that you are editing for. You'll see that it's got some brands on here. So, for example, Red, which are the cinematic cameras. It has sequence presets for that. Thing up to 5K, it looks like. So go on there and I can look at what I want to work in. Now, I do not have the money for a Red, so we definitely don't have a Red. Probably more than anything, you're going to be in here, AVC HD. And here you have all of the folders for the different types of HD. So interlaced or not, we tend to be in 1080p. And again, in here, this all depends on things like the frame size and the frame rate. Generally speaking, if you are using our Canons or our NX100s, they tend to shoot at, I believe it's 25 frames per second. But that's basically what this is saying. So it's AVC HD, 1080p, so HD, and 25 frames per second. Could be 30 frames per second, 50 frames per second, or 60 frames per second. Our Black Magic shoot at 60, I believe. But generally speaking, if I'm being honest, you're going to be somewhere around the 24 or 25, right? Let's go for 25. Depending on what camera you've used and what kind of footage you import, you will usually get the option to change the sequence settings to match what it is that you have. All right, so just for argument's sake, I'm going to go for 25. Okay. Down here, you can see it didn't import that new sequence for some reason. So I'm going to call this Premiere Lessons 1. Okay. And that's about it. If we just look through some of the other settings here, you've got some kind of custom settings. If we are doing things for the studio, there are specific settings we need that the A10 can read, for example. So we have to go through this. We have to change these to fit that. I'm not going to go too crazy into what all of these individual things mean, if I'm being honest, not now at least. We will do at some point. But again, you can see all of the different options we have there, as well as the timestamps. You'll see here, for example, 60 frames per second is technically 59.94 frames per second, and 24 is 23.976. I don't teach maths, so don't ask me the technicalities of that. I just accept it as fact. All right. That's all looking pretty good. We're not going to worry about tracks as such. This is basically where we can add in more or less audio tracks that we can talk about if we want them to be 5.1, so surround sound or mono, but again, that's for another day. VR video, we will sort out another time. We will be doing stuff like that with our interactive projects. So yeah, for now, we're just going to kind of keep it like that. We're going to press OK. And you'll see now I have this sequence here, and it's opened up a brand new tab over here. Okay, so I've got stuff, but I have no video. So what can I do? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at my folders here, and I'm going to take that last video that I did over here. And again, I prefer to do this and use the media browser because it can be quite tricky to find, or to go to file import or the import thing up here. To me, this is the easiest option, and I would suggest that you do the same. Just click and drag. What will happen is it will say it can't do it because it's an MKV. So this is one of the first issues that you sometimes find. It will go, this file type isn't supported. And the reason for that is that it has different compression. Again, I'm not going to get into the technicalities of it. Just accept it as fact that some videos work, some videos don't. MKV is one of those, okay? Now, the reason this doesn't work is because this was recorded in OBS, and OBS takes it from the default as an MKV. I'm not sure why. So that one won't work. So that's usually the first problem you will face. So let's go for a video that we know definitely will work. So I'm going to go back to my videos here. I go to captures, and I've got here some animations that I recorded for something. So you can see that these are MP4s. I'm just going to drag these in. Boop. And you'll see that it adds it in. So the next thing is, how do I actually get this onto here? And we're just going to focus on video for now. Okay. So first thing is, I want to have a look at this and see what I actually want. So I'm going to double click it. Go. So we have up here, let's play some animations going on. Cool. This is a great site, by the way, if you ever need anything 3D. Mixamo, you should have it with your Adobe account. Just download all its animations. I use them for lots of things. Show you some sometime. Okay, so I've got this now. It's a 15-second clip. I don't want all 15 seconds, but say I did for argument's sake. All I have to do is click, drag onto the timeline. I can put it wherever I want to. It will snap to the start if you drag it over. And now we get this pop up. So this is the thing I was just talking about. So the sequence settings that we have currently don't match what the clip is. And sometimes you'll find this, you might expect that you've set things up for a very particular type of sequence. And what will turn out is that you've done it in something else, okay? So you kind of have two options here. One is that you can keep the existing settings and then you just have to rescale things, and you might find that you get issues with frame rates and what have you. Or you press change sequence settings, it will change everything to match that clip. Now, this can be a problem if you do this. If you've already edited loads of stuff and then you bring in a video and it asks you this and you change the sequence settings, your whole timeline will change. And it will be all the settings that you set up that were working for all the other clips will be gone, and it will just be for this one. Now, if you know that you've just done a shoot and everything is going to be in this settings and you haven't started editing yet, the quicker option is to just do this, okay? Unless you had anything planned with what you'd set up. So I'm going to change my sequence settings. Click. And you can see it's slightly changed the layout of this here, okay? And yeah, that's kind of that. So here we have this 15-second clip. So if I press play, there we go, we've got my video. Now, there's no audio on this, but you can see it's also imported in a dead audio track. I'll show you how to zoom in on all these in a second as well. One thing I want you to make a note of is this color here. This is currently yellow, which means that it needs rendering, but essentially that it will play. If this is ever red, you'll start to find that your footage will kind of be a bit jumpy, and that is because it needs to process what the video has going on. It could be that you've added in loads of keyframes and it doesn't quite know what you want to do with them. It hasn't quite worked it out yet. So you need to render that to be able to make that work. When it's rendered, usually it goes green. Okay, so how do we render that footage to make it kind of run better? If I go up to sequence, you see here I have all these options for render. We've got render effects into out. Sometimes you only need to render what you've added to it. Render into out. If you've selected something, you can just render that selection. Sometimes you have to render the audio because it's sometimes it doesn't show the waveform, or sometimes again it's a bit jumpy. And sometimes you can also delete render files. I've never ever done that, if I'm being honest. So I'm just going to go render into out. And you'll see it comes up with this video here, and it will take a minute. It will render each frame as it goes through, and now you can see that it's green, and it will start playing through, and you won't notice a difference with this clip because it's just playing it as it was. But if I had loads of effects on this that was slowing it down, that would then start playing. All right, so let's, for argument's sake, let's say we have loads and loads of videos in here. Let me just kind of drag in some of these other ones. Boom, boom, boom. If I drag these in, I can just literally put them one after the other, like so. Or again, I can open them up in this preview window and I can drag them from up here. Boom, boom, boom. And what will happen is, when I press play, you'll see that they will, I'm going to kind of drag through the timeline just to make it quicker. You'll see that one will play, the other will play, the other. Okay. Now this is where you might run into problem number 2. if I was to take this video and I was to drag it over this one and then go, oh no, I've dragged it over, I'm going to move it away, you'll see that actually it's deleted some of that video that it overlaid. So I can get that back by just clicking and dragging it back out again. Okay, I always do that. Sometimes it will just be something small. I'll just take the end off of a clip by accident, but it's one of the most common problems that I tend to face as an editor. Snap kind of helps you with that because you've got to actively really try to put it over there to mess it up. So unless you're rushing, you don't tend to. But this is what I was talking about in the last video. Sometimes you need to turn snap off, and that is because you want to do a really fine adjustment. If I click on the magnet, I can also press S on my keyboard. I can move this around and it won't snap to anything. All right, I can literally put it wherever I want to. I'd suggest leaving snap on for now. The other thing that I can do is I can layer these up. I'm just going to turn snap off just to make this a bit clearer. But if I drag this up onto the next video up, I can also overlay videos one on top of the other. You can see here I've immediately faced that problem with the audio, by the way. See, now it's deleted the audio from there. Yeah. Again, just something to be aware of. Always drag it onto another track first before you move it over, just to make your life easier. Usually, it will also drag the audio down a track when you move one up a track, but it didn't, probably because I've got snap turned off. Okay, so as you can see here now, I've got this video. And what it will do is when it gets to the one that's on top, it will cut to that one. So I'll just press play. So we've got the animation there, and then it's cut to a completely different video that's on top. And it will stop playing. It will go basically for whichever one is on top. So I could have loads and loads of videos layered on top of each other, and it's only going to play the video that is on top. That is not true for audio. If you stack audio one on top of the other, they will all play at the same time. So video will play what's on top. Audio will play all of them at once. Okay? So how do we fix that problem? Well, if I just clear this. Sometimes you only want the video, right? Maybe you've got two characters having a conversation. You just want to cut to another angle of another character reacting to what one's saying, but you don't want to be messing around cutting the audio in and out. You just want one audio track playing, but you want different bits of video playing. That's where these two buttons come in handy. So what I can do is I can just drag the video. Okay, and again, it's going to come up with this. Just change those sequence settings. So now I've just got video, or I can just drag audio. All right. So that's kind of how we get things into the project and how we start getting things onto the timeline. There's just one last thing I'm going to show you before we start going over how to actually edit. And that is going to be how to just select a little bit of this. So these are called in and out markers. So let's say, for example, I want this animation, but I just want it from here to here, right? What I can do is I can click on this bracket, or I can press I on my keyboard. And then I can go to where I want it to stop. And I can press this bracket, or I can press O on the keyboard, and it will just give me that. See, it's giving me a little clip instead. All right. So that is how we get our project files in, set up our sequence, and how we start dragging things onto the timeline, and how we kind of avoid some of those basic problems.